You need to kind of simplify down and realize what's most important. The 80-20 rule applies here. All this training relies on the presupposition that there's disproportionate outputs per inputs.
100%.
So, there's no point in being wise or having wisdom if it doesn't benefit you in some way to make a better choice. And so there is this idea that if you have like all the things that here's all the success you have, but 80% of it, and here's all the things you do, right? And so if this is your success, and this is all the things you did, right, for success, 20% of everything you did actually gave you the results, 80% of the results. Or 20%. So these things you did led to most of the results. Yep. Just few things of all you did, right? And so what's the difference between a billionaire and say a millionaire? How do they use the 80-20 rule to get that much more?
They only do the 20% of the things that are bringing in the most
prioritization.
Right.
Success.
However, you can stack it. So well, an example, not a direct output, but an example is this. In terms of wealth in the United States, 20% have 80% of the wealth.
Yeah.
But of that 20%, those has 80% of that wealth. Mm-hmm. And of that 20% of those have 80% of that wealth. Mm-hmm. And what happens is, if you keep on stacking it, you get to people who have really, there's no longer the 80-20 rule. It's the 1 and 99. You start stacking it and stacking it and stacking it, to where you have a just larger and larger and larger. And that's learning how to stack it, realizing that even I've gotten to a certain level, now what 20% of what I'm doing now is giving me 80%? And how can I move it farther? Like, what can I do? What's the most important of what I've been doing? Then I just do more of that and less of everything else.
Andy, I'd like to chime in and say that from my execution standpoint, I live off this principle. Because you can get into what's called analysis paralysis when you're looking at business opportunities and options. And so I always focus on gathering 80% of the data. If I have 80% of that, and you can't, it's a guide. I'm not going to sit here and quantify it. So I'm only at 79. But if I can consciously say I'm 80% comfortable that my risk has been mitigated. I mean, this principle is so important.
It is. And I've heard it for years, right? But again, it's how do you take it from here to here to here? Like, how do you take it and I understand it, I get it in my gut, and now I apply it across the board and everything, and then I apply it harder and harder and harder, over and over and over again, right? And so it really, you can apply it to every single one of these daisy chain of all the things in your life. You should be applying it to it, because if they're important to get good results, high results. And so it is like a lot of people, for instance, an example of not doing the 80-20 rule is perfectionism.
Yeah.
Where you start to think, number one, you have the illusion that you can be perfect, which is just simply not possible. It's not part of human experience. You can be perfectly satisfied, but in terms of perfection, usually it's not possible by most definitions. Okay, so you have this. And what happens is, instead of being perfect, you end up being really sad and really messed up, and really, because focusing when you're trying to be perfect, number one, you're trying, which is this part of your conscious mind, which means you're not doing this, and probably not doing this well, but definitely not doing this well, right? So you're not realizing that when this works good, you're going to do it automatically and well. And if you're just intense, being real intense about it, you're probably not having that mix of how you function. All parts of you kind of all together. So basically, your heart is sitting down on the sidelines, and your brain's trying to do all the work, right? And you said, and it turns out that most of the work actually gets done by your body, heart, subconscious, right? And this guy's good at telling this guy what to do, but not the specifics. He can say, hey, we're going over there, and then your heart and body is going to be like, this is how we're going to do it. But it's the same as any business. You need a leader, but the leader needs to get out of the way and let the people work, right? And so a leader can do a little bit, but usually the leader actually sucks at it. If you ever watch Undercover Boss or some billionaire or boss or whatever it is, it's the boss a lot of times is doing these little, minimum wage jobs, and everyone, and the person that actually does it, this guy's a millionaire versus so-and-so wasn't very good at his job, you
Yeah.
know, and you're like, it's like, it's the same thing. So you have to kind of learn that there's this order and there's an integration, and each part of you has this really important thing that they should be doing, but if they do something else. And so that goes to like the perfectionism and the 80-20 rule, where it's like, oh, I'm gonna be perfect. And so really what that means is I have a big ego, and I am going to be 100% focused here in terms of who I am and what I'm doing, in my thought, in my rational thought. And so you end up doing a lot, but it's not very effective, and it gets you way far off results from just being okay with, you know what, this is the reality. 20% of what I do does do it, so I'm going to just do that 20% and do more of it. And suddenly you get far better results. And they're never perfect, they're just better. You know, like way better.